The distress beacon screamed across 17 star systems before anyone answered. By then, Colony Meridian 7 had been burning for 6 hours. Commander Thala's 4 arms trembled as she watched the Vaskren war machines tear through the settlement's outer shields. The crystalline structures that housed 3,000 Orvani civilians shattered like glass under orbital bombardment. She'd sent the universal plea for aid, knowing it was futile. The nearest Allied fleet was weeks away, and the Vaskren didn't leave survivors. "Ma'am, we're receiving a response," her communications officer whispered, mandibles clicking in disbelief. "From whom?" "The signal routing is chaotic. It's bouncing through dead relays and abandoned satellites. The source identifier says Terra. Terra. Earth. The death world everyone whispered about in safe harbors. The planet that spawned creatures so violent they'd nearly destroyed themselves before achieving spaceflight. The species so unstable that half the Galactic Council had voted to quarantine their entire system. What do they want? They're asking for coordinates and threat assessment? That's all." Another explosion rocked the command center. The Vaskren were 3 minutes from breaching the inner shields. Thala had 400 armed defenders against a force of 10,000. Mathematics didn't lie. "Send everything," she said. "If they're offering help, I don't care what they are." The response came in broken Galactic Standard. The grammar awkward, but the meaning clear. "Hang on. We're close." 19 minutes later, Thala's scanners went insane. The human ship didn't arrive through conventional FTL. It punched a hole in reality itself, emerging from what Thala's instruments classified as spatial violation. The vessel was wrong, asymmetrical, covered in scorch marks and what looked like hastily welded armor plating. Energy signatures fluctuated wildly across its hull. No proper military force would field something so chaotic. Then it opened fire. The Vaskren command carrier, a vessel 3 kilometers long that had been methodically dismantling the colony, simply ceased to exist. One moment it dominated orbital space, the next it was an expanding cloud of superheated plasma. The human ship had used a weapon that Thala's instruments couldn't classify, something that ignored shields entirely and detonated the carrier's reactor from the inside. The remaining Vaskren ships scattered, but the humans were already moving. The vessel accelerated at speeds that should have liquefied any crew, performing maneuvers that violated every principle of inertial compensation. It didn't fight like a warship. It fought like a predator, positioning itself to hit enemies from angles they couldn't cover, using debris fields for concealment, baiting larger vessels into wasting ammunition on feints. A Vaskren destroyer tried to run. The human ship fired a single projectile, a solid slug of tungsten traveling at. The impact released kinetic energy equivalent to a tactical nuclear weapon. The destroyer broke apart, its hull screaming as it died. Thala realized she was watching something the galaxy had forgotten. Total war. Not the carefully managed conflicts between civilized species, bound by treaties and honor codes. This was violence stripped to its purest form, efficient and merciless. Within 8 minutes, 17 Vaskren vessels had been reduced to wreckage. The survivors fled into FTL, abandoning their ground forces. The human ship settled into a stationary orbit above the colony. Thala received a transmission, audio only, the galactic standard still fractured but comprehensible. Meridian, 7 Command, this is USCS Reckoning. Ground forces inbound. Advise your people to stay inside. We'll handle cleanup. A pause. You called. We came. That's all that matters right now. 52 pods fell from the human ship, impact-resistant cylinders that punched through the atmosphere like meteorites. They slammed into the settlement's outskirts, each leaving a crater. The pods opened with explosive charges, and the humans emerged. Thala's observation drones captured everything. The beings stood upright on 2 legs, encased in powered armor that made them appear larger than their natural size. They carried weapons that seemed primitive, chemically propelled projectiles and directed energy rifles. But the way they moved made Thala's instincts scream warnings. They advanced in coordinated teams, using terrain and structures for cover, communicating through signals she couldn't intercept. The Vaskren ground forces had fortified positions in the settlement's industrial sector. They outnumbered the humans 3-1 and had superior defensive positions. It didn't matter. The humans fought like nothing Thala had ever witnessed. They didn't advance in organized lines or follow predictable tactical doctrine. They adapted constantly, exploiting weaknesses instantly, using the environment as a weapon. When one team drew fire, another flanked. When Vaskren forces fortified a position, the humans simply destroyed the entire structure, collapsing buildings with precision explosives. A Vaskren commander attempted to negotiate surrender. The human shot him mid-sentence. Thela felt her breathing spiracles constrict. These weren't soldiers following rules of engagement. These were survivors who'd learned warfare in a crucible that made the Vaskrin look gentle. 3 hours after landing, the last Vaskrin position fell. The humans gathered their dead 7 casualties that they treated with reverence that surprised Thela, and established a perimeter. They moved with exhausted efficiency, checking buildings for survivors, setting up medical stations, distributing supplies they'd brought from their ship. Thela authorized a team to make contact. The humans removed their helmets in the presence of her delegates. Their faces were smooth and soft, with forward-facing eyes that marked them as predators. But what struck Thela most was their youth. These weren't grizzled veterans. The oldest looked barely into their 3rd decade of life. The one who stepped forward had dark skin and eyes that seemed to catalog everything instantly. Commander Thela, Captain Marcus Webb, USCS Reckoning. We've secured the settlement. You've got wounded who need attention and infrastructure damage that's critical. My people can help, but we need your authorization. You saved us, Thela managed. Why? Earth is quarantined. You're not supposed to be in this sector. Webb's expression shifted into something that might have been a smile, but held no warmth. We heard someone screaming. Couldn't ignore that. As for the quarantine, we've been breaking it for 2 years now. Someone needs to. Considering how often people call for help and nobody comes, the council can file a formal complaint. After they explain why they let 3,000 civilians burn while their fleet sat in dock. Webb gestured to the ruined settlement. We'll stay until you're stable, then we're gone. You don't have to acknowledge we were here. But understand this, Commander. We're listening now. Anyone calls for help, we'll answer. Every time. Thela's security officer touched her shoulder, mandibles quivering. Ma'am, the Queen needs to know about this. If Earth is actively operating in Council space, if they're this capable, send a full report, Thela said quietly, watching the humans work alongside her people, seeing how her civilians reacted not with fear, but with desperate gratitude. Tell Her Majesty everything. The ships, the weapons, the tactics, everything. Webb was already walking away, speaking into his communication device in rapid-fire English that Thela's translator struggled to follow. His team moved around him with practiced coordination, veterans despite their youth, scarred by experiences the galaxy couldn't imagine. The report would reach the Arvani homeworld in 6 days. It would land on the desk of Queen Sarathi herself, the monarch who'd built an empire on careful diplomacy and measured strength. She'd read about Earth, about the monsters who'd answered a desperate plea, while civilized species debated protocol, and she'd understand immediately what everyone else was about to learn. The humans weren't coming to conquer. They were coming to protect, which made them far more dangerous than any invasion force, because you couldn't predict monsters who fought for someone else's survival. The galaxy had spent centuries avoiding Earth, treating humanity like a dangerous curiosity safely contained behind quarantine barriers. But isolation bred desperation, and desperation bred innovation. While the Council maintained their careful peace, humanity had been sharpening themselves on problems no one else wanted to solve. Thela watched the Reckoning hold position in orbit, its scarred hull testament to battles fought in shadows, and wondered how many other colonies had seen that same ship appear when hope had died. How many other commanders had sent reports like hers, documenting the impossible? How long before the galaxy realized the monsters had already escaped their cage and were hunting in the dark between the stars? Captain Webb's voice crackled over the settlement's emergency channel, addressing everyone who could hear. Meridian. 7, you're safe now. We'll maintain position for 72 hours. After that, we're gone. But remember, you're not alone out here. Not anymore. The transmission ended. The humans continued their work, moving through the ruins with purpose, helping people who hours ago had been waiting to die. Thela began composing her report to the Queen, choosing each word carefully, knowing that what she wrote would change everything. The galaxy had called out in desperation, never expecting an answer from the quarantine death world. But Earth had been listening, waiting, preparing. And now they were here, these young monsters with old eyes, offering help with one hand while keeping the other on their weapons. Queen Sarathi would read these words and make a choice that would define the next century, acknowledge humanity's existence and risk empowering them, or continue the quarantine and admit they couldn't protect their own people. Neither option was safe. Neither option was simple. But as Thela watched a human medic cradle an injured Orvani child with surprising gentleness, whispering something that made the child's chittering calm, she realized the choice had already been made. The humans weren't asking permission anymore. They were answering calls, one colony at a time, building gratitude and loyalty that no amount of council politics could erase. By the time anyone decided how to respond, Earth would already be woven into the fabric of a dozen civilizations, impossible to remove without tearing everything apart. Brilliant. Terrifying. Inevitable. The monsters had come when called, and the galaxy would never be the same. The report reached Queen Saradi's chambers during the third moonrise, delivered by a messenger who traveled through 4 relay stations without rest. The Queen's primary advisor, an elderly Orvani named Keseth, whose chitin had gone silver with age, watched her read with growing concern. Sarathi's 4 eyes moved across the data slate with increasing speed, her breathing spiracles opening and closing in a rhythm Keseth recognized as deep thought mixed with alarm. The Queen was known for her composure, for decisions made through careful analysis rather than emotional reaction.
But the report from Meridian 7 was testing that legendary control.
Humans, she said finally, setting down the slate. We quarantined them 40 years ago. The Council's anthropological assessment concluded they were too unstable for integration, too violent, too unpredictable. The assessment was correct, Your Majesty, Kessis said carefully. Look at their tactics. No warning, no attempt at diplomatic resolution. They simply destroyed the Vaskran fleet. That's not the behavior of a civilized species. They saved 3,000 of my people. Saradi's voice remained level, but her mandibles clicked once, a gesture she used when challenging assumptions. While our nearest fleet sat in dock, filling out authorization requests and debating jurisdiction, humans crossed 60 light-years and eliminated the threat in minutes. Tell me, Keseth, which behavior seems more civilized? The advisor had no answer. Sarathi rose from her resting platform, her ceremonial robes shifting around her thorax. She moved to the chamber's window, looking out over the capital city, where millions of Orvani lived in crystalline towers that caught the triple sun's light. Beautiful. Peaceful. Protected by treaties and alliances that had taken centuries to build. Contact our intelligence division, she said. I want everything they have on Earth. Not the sanitized council reports, actual intelligence. What are the humans doing? How many ships do they have? Where have they been operating? Your Majesty, if you're considering opening relations with Earth, the Council will... The Council, Sarati interrupted, has been pretending the humans don't exist while they've been operating in our space for 2 years. According to this report, the human captain referenced multiple interventions. That means Meridian 7 wasn't an isolated incident. The question isn't whether we should acknowledge them. They're already here. The question is whether we control that acknowledgement, or let it control us. Keseth's spiracles fluttered with anxiety. You're talking about breaking the quarantine, making Earth an official presence in Council space. The other species will see it as legitimizing violence, rewarding aggression, or they'll see it as pragmatism. Sarathi turned from the window, her 4 eyes focusing on her advisor, with the intensity that had made her one of the most effective rulers in Orvani history. The galaxy is changing, old friend. The Vaskran grow bolder, testing our borders, attacking colonies that should be protected. Our allies debate while our people die. And now these humans appear, asking nothing, taking nothing, simply answering calls for help. She paused.
What does that tell you?
That they're building loyalty, creating obligation, and in 6 months, maybe a year, when another colony screams for help and council ships arrive too late, those colonists will remember that humans came when no one else did. They'll petition for human protection. They'll invite them in officially, and we'll have lost our chance to shape that relationship. Keseth's chitin seemed to darken. You want to invite them first, before they become a problem we can't control. I want to understand what we're dealing with. Every species in the Council knows Earth exists, knows about the quarantine. We treat them like dangerous children who need to be contained. But children don't build ships capable of spatial violations. Children don't develop weapons that bypass shield technology. Children don't execute military operations with that level of precision. She picked up the data slate again, reviewing the tactical analysis Commander Thiela had included. These aren't reckless savages, Keseth. They're trained, disciplined, and fighting with technology that shouldn't exist. Either they've made breakthroughs our scientists missed, or they've been preparing for something we don't understand. Either way, ignorance is dangerous. What are you proposing? Send a message to Earth, official channels. Tell them Queen Sarathi of Orvan requests a meeting with their leadership, not through the council, not through intermediaries. Direct contact. I want to understand who these humans are and what they want. And if they refuse, if they prefer to operate in shadows, then we'll know they're not interested in diplomacy, only in building a shadow empire of grateful colonies. But I don't think they'll refuse. Sarathi gestured to the report. This Captain Webb could have ignored Meridian. 7. He could have demanded payment or territorial concessions. Instead, he saved my people and asked for nothing. That suggests either remarkable altruism or sophisticated long-term strategy. Either way, I need to know which. Keseth hesitated, then bowed, his thorax lowering in formal acknowledgement. I'll prepare the message, but Your Majesty, the Council will see this as a violation. We're supposed to present unified policies regarding species contact. If they'd responded to Meridian 7's distress call, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Their failure to act has created a vacuum, and nature abhors a vacuum. Better we fill it with careful diplomacy than let chaos rush in. The advisor withdrew, leaving Sarathi alone with her thoughts and the detailed report from a colony that should have died. She read it 3 more times, memorizing every detail. The human captain's words. The tactics they employed, the way they treated both their own dead and the Orvani civilians with equal care. Violence and compassion intertwined. Efficiency and emotion balanced. They were contradictions, these humans. Dangerous but protective.
Advanced but quarantined.
Operating outside council law while following their own rigid code. She thought about the captain's final transmission. You're not alone out here. Not anymore. Simple words, but they carried implications that rippled across strategic calculations. Humans weren't offering alliance or demanding tribute. They were offering presence, the promise that someone would answer when calls went out into the dark. How many species would refuse that offer? How many colonies, isolated and vulnerable, would choose careful council protection that arrived too late over immediate human response that arrived in time? The math was simple. The political consequences were not. Her communication crystal chimed, Keseth working with unprecedented speed. Your Majesty, we've located Earth's diplomatic frequency. It's been broadcasting on an open channel for 18 months. They've been waiting for someone to contact them. 18 months. Sarathi's spiracles constricted. The humans had established a communication channel and simply waited, making no demands, applying no pressure. Patient. Either remarkably naive or playing a game several moves ahead of everyone else. Send the message, she ordered. Personal channel, my encryption. Make it clear this is from me directly, not from the Council. Include the Meridian 7 incident report and my gratitude for their intervention. Request a meeting at their earliest convenience, location of their choosing. Your Majesty, giving them choice of location puts you at a disadvantage.
Protocol suggests neutral territory.
The humans have already demonstrated they don't care about our protocols. If we want honest conversation, we need to show trust. Let them choose. The message went out on channels that technically didn't exist, using communication protocols the Council had forbidden. Within the hour, Sarathi received a response. Brief, direct, startling. Queen Sarathi, we accept your invitation. We will come to you. Send coordinates for secure landing. We'll arrive in 4 days. Minimal escort. We're not here to threaten. We're here to talk. Captain Sarah Chen, USCS Prometheus, speaking for Earth's Expeditionary Council. 4 days. They were already close, probably monitoring council space, waiting for exactly this kind of contact. Sarathi felt something she rarely experienced, the sensation of being outmaneuvered before negotiations even began. The humans had positioned themselves perfectly. Heroes who saved Orvani civilians, mysterious benefactors who asked nothing in return, and now guests responding to royal invitation with humble acceptance. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. She summoned her security chief, an Orvani named Thex, whose reputation for paranoia had kept her alive through 3 assassination attempts. We're receiving Earth visitors in 4 days. I want security measures that assume they're capable of anything, but I want those measures invisible. No shows of force. No implied threats. We're hosting guests, not containing prisoners. Tex's spiracles flared. Your Majesty, these are humans. Unknown capabilities, unknown intentions. Minimal visible security is dangerous. Everything about this situation is dangerous. That's why we're doing it. Sarathi's 4 eyes fixed on her security chief with absolute focus. Listen carefully. These humans could have approached us with threats or demands. Instead, they saved our people and waited for us to contact them. That shows either genuine good intentions or manipulative brilliance. Either way, responding with obvious suspicion will poison any chance at productive dialogue. We need to understand them, and that requires appearing open even while preparing for betrayal. Understood. Hidden contingencies. Visible welcome. And Thex, I want analysis of their ship when it arrives. Every sensor we have focused on their vessel. I need to know their capabilities. The security chief bowed and departed. Sarathi returned to the window, watching her city prepare for evening, unaware that in 4 days representatives from humanity would walk these streets. The people who'd answered Meridian. 7's scream. The species everyone feared but no one truly understood. She wondered what they looked like in person, these humans. The reports described them as bipedal, forward-facing eyes, limited sensory organs compared to most species, physically weak without their armor, reliant on tools and technology. They sounded vulnerable, almost fragile. But vulnerable species didn't develop weapons that ignored shields. Fragile species didn't execute perfect military operations against numerically superior forces. There was something missing from the official assessments, something the anthropologists had overlooked. A message arrived from Keseth. Your Majesty, the Council has learned of your invitation. They're requesting immediate explanation. Sarathi felt her mandibles click in satisfaction. Let them request. Let them debate and argue and form committees to study the implications. While they talked, she'd act. While they worried about precedent, she'd establish facts. The humans were coming. And when they arrived, Sarathi would have 4 days to learn what everyone else had spent 40 years avoiding. She'd discover what kind of species answered screams in the dark, who fought with ruthless efficiency but treated casualties with reverence, who built ships that violated physics and weapons that shouldn't exist. She'd learn what the monsters truly were, beyond the fear and speculation. And then she'd decide whether to welcome them into the light or help push them back into shadow. Either way, the galaxy was about to change. The quarantine had failed not through breaking, but through irrelevance. Earth had escaped not by force, but by simple necessity. They'd heard someone calling for help, and they'd answered. Now the Queen would answer back, and see what happened when monsters and monarchs sat down to talk. The countdown began. 4 days until first contact. 4 days to prepare for a conversation that might reshape everything. Sarathi looked at the stars rising over her capital and wondered which one was Earth. Which distant point of light held the death world that spawned these confusing, dangerous, noble creatures who saved strangers and asked nothing in return. We're coming, the human captain had said. Simple words, profound implications. Sarathi would be ready. The human ship arrived exactly on schedule, dropping out of FTL at the coordinates Sarathi had provided, far enough from Orvin Prime to avoid causing alarm, close enough to demonstrate trust. The vessel was smaller than the Reckoning, sleeker, less obviously militarized, but Thex's sensors immediately began compiling anomalies. The ship's hull was composed of materials that absorbed scanning frequencies, making detailed analysis impossible. Energy signatures fluctuated in patterns that suggested either unstable reactors or deliberate masking. The vessel maintained perfect station keeping, without visible thruster corrections, implying propulsion technology that operated on principles Orvani scientists didn't understand. It's a diplomatic ship, Thex reported to Sarathi, doubt heavy in his voice. But it could become a weapons platform in seconds. Everything about it is dual purpose. Even their communication array could probably function as a directed energy weapon. Send the approach vector and welcome message. The human ship acknowledged and began its descent. It moved through Orvin Prime's orbital space with casual precision, navigating around traffic patterns without hesitation, as if their pilot had made this approach 100 times before. Impossible. Humans had never visited Orvin Prime. Either their navigational computers were extraordinarily sophisticated, or they'd been monitoring the planet's patterns from a distance for quite some time. More questions. Always more questions with these humans. The landing pad Sarathi had designated was in the palace's diplomatic quarter, a section of the capital designed to host foreign dignitaries. The human ship settled onto the platform with barely a whisper of displaced air, its landing so gentle that monitoring equipment registered almost no impact stress. Show-off precision? Or standard capability? The ship's boarding ramp extended. Thex's hidden security teams tensed, weapons powered but concealed. Sarathi stood at the edge of the landing platform, her ceremonial robes flowing in the gentle breeze, presenting the image of a confident monarch welcoming honored guests. 3 humans descended. The lead figure was female. Sarathi had studied enough about human sexual dimorphism to identify that much, with dark hair pulled back severely, wearing a uniform that somehow looked both formal and functional. She moved with controlled grace, eyes scanning the environment with predator's focus. Captain Sarah Chen, according to the transmission. Behind her walked 2 others, 1 male and 1 female, both slightly younger, both carrying themselves with military bearing despite wearing what appeared to be diplomatic attire. No visible weapons, but Sarathi doubted that meant they were unarmed. Captain Chen approached and performed a gesture Sarathi recognized from human cultural databases. A slight bow, hand over heart. Your Majesty, thank you for this invitation. I'm Captain Sarah Chen. These are my colleagues, Lieutenant James Rodriguez and Dr. Lisa Okonkwo. Captain Chen. Welcome to Orvin Prime. Sarathi returned the gesture with the Orvani equivalent. Crossed up her arms, mandibles spread in greeting. I hope your journey was comfortable. It was efficient, which is what matters. Chen's eyes met Sarathi's directly, a boldness most species considered aggressive. I appreciate your willingness to speak directly rather than through the council. It saves time and reduces complications. The council serves its purpose, but some conversations require directness. Sarathi gestured toward the palace. Please walk with me. We have much to discuss, and I find that important conversations benefit from movement. They walked through the crystalline gardens, past sculptures that caught the triple sun's light and transformed it into dancing colors. Sarathi's security teams shadowed from a distance, invisible but omnipresent. The humans showed awareness of the surveillance without acknowledging it, another sign of professional training. You saved 3,000 of my people at Meridian. 7, Sarathi said, dispensing with preliminary pleasantries. Commander Thala's report was illuminating. The Vaskran fleet was destroyed in under 10 minutes. The ground forces eliminated in 3 hours. Your casualties were minimal. Your tactics were unlike anything our military doctrine suggests as effective. Chen nodded. We fight differently. Most galactic species wage war like it's a sport with rules. We wage war like it's survival. There's a difference. Indeed. But that raises questions. Earth has been quarantined for 40 years. Your technology should be decades behind ours. Yet your weapons, your ships, your tactics, they're not inferior. They're incompatible. As if you're playing a different game entirely. A slight smile crossed Chen's face. Accurate assessment. The quarantine isolated us from your trade networks and scientific exchange. It didn't stop us from developing. It just meant we developed alone, solving problems our own way. Which created knowledge gaps, Dr. Okonkwo added, speaking for the first time. She was younger than Chen, with warm eyes that contradicted the clinical precision of her words. We don't know your shield frequencies because we were never given them. So we developed weapons that don't care about shields. We don't use your FTL navigation protocols because we weren't included in the network. So we built our own, which means our approach vectors don't match expected patterns. Isolation bred innovation, Sarathi said quietly. Isolation bred necessity. Innovation followed. Chen paused by a fountain, watching the water cascade through crystalline channels. Your Majesty, we're not here to complain about the quarantine. That's history. We're here because we've been operating in council space for 2 years, answering distress calls, and we think it's time to acknowledge that officially. You could continue operating in shadows. You could build gratitude and loyalty across a dozen species without council oversight. We could. And part of our leadership wanted exactly that, build a network of allied colonies who owe us favors, create a shadow empire outside council control. Chen's expression hardened. But that's not sustainable, and it's not honest. We came out here because people were calling for help and nobody was answering. We stayed because the need didn't stop. But operating in shadows creates misunderstandings. It breeds fear, eventually. Someone would decide we're a threat and respond accordingly. Made official, we'd rather be understood. Lieutenant Rodriguez spoke up, his voice carrying an accent Sarathi's translators struggled with. The quarantine happened because first contact went badly. Humans were aggressive, territorial, unpredictable. All true. We were fresh out of our own global conflicts, barely unified, scared of everything we met. We reacted like cornered animals because that's what we were. And now? Now we've had 40 years to grow up, to learn from mistakes. to figure out who we want to be in a galaxy full of civilized species. Chen resumed walking, leading them deeper into the gardens. We're still aggressive, still territorial, still unpredictable by your standards. But we're also loyal, protective, and we don't abandon people who need help. The question is whether the galaxy can work with that instead of trying to fix it. Sarathi felt her breathing spiracles constrict. Chen was offering integration on Earth's terms, not the Council's. No apologies, no promises to change, just an honest assessment of what humanity was, and a challenge to accept it. Bold. Risky. Potentially disastrous. The Council will resist, Sarathi said. You're asking them to accept a species they fear, who breaks their rules, who fights in ways they find disturbing? We're not asking the Council. We're asking you. Chen stopped, turning to face Sarathi directly. You're one of the most powerful monarchs in Council space. Your people have the third largest fleet, control 15 colony worlds, and hold significant influence over 6 other species. If you acknowledge Earth, others will follow. If you don't, we'll continue operating in shadows until either someone forces integration or someone forces war. Neither option is optimal. You're very well informed about Council politics for a quarantined species. We've been listening for 40 years. Learning. Just because you didn't talk to us doesn't mean we weren't paying attention. Dr. Okonkwo pulled out a data device, offering it to Sarathi. This contains detailed reports on every intervention we've made in the past 2 years. 19 colonies saved. 7 diplomatic crises resolved. 3 natural disasters where we provided relief. We're not asking for credit. We are establishing a pattern of behavior. We help when called, we leave when asked. We don't demand payment or territory. That's who we are. Sarathi accepted the device, her 4 eyes scanning the data. 19 interventions. 7 of them in Orvani space, protecting her colonies while her own fleets had been delayed by bureaucracy or distance. The Council didn't know, or had chosen not to know, that human ships had been operating across their territories, answering calls no one else heard. Why don't you demand payment? Sarathi asked. Resources, territory, political concessions. You've earned leverage. Because that's not why we do it. Chen's voice carried quiet conviction. Humanity spent centuries fighting itself, destroying our own people over resources and territory and ideology. We almost didn't make it out of our home system. When we finally reached the stars and found this galaxy full of civilized species who'd solved the problems we were still bleeding over, we felt ashamed, backward, primitive. The quarantine reinforced that, Rodriguez added. The Council looking at us like dangerous children who needed to be contained until we grew up. So we made a choice, Chen continued. We could try to become what you wanted. Polite, peaceful, or we could accept what we are, aggressive, protective, chaotic, and use those traits for something good. Turns out the galaxy needs someone willing to fight ugly when necessary. Someone who doesn't count the cost before responding. Someone who hears screaming and comes running without checking profit margins first. Noble sentiments. But every species claims noble intentions. True. That's why we brought evidence instead of promises. Dr. Pry, Okonkwo gestured to the data device. Review the interventions. Contact the colonies we helped. Ask them if we demanded anything. Ask them if they feel threatened or grateful. Then decide. Sarathi felt the weight of decision pressing down. Chen was right. If Orvin acknowledged Earth, others would follow. But if she endorsed humanity and they betrayed that trust, her kingdom would suffer the consequences. Political calculation warred with instinct, and instinct was screaming that these humans were telling the truth. Dangerous truth, but truth nonetheless. Come, Sarathi said, making a decision. There's someone I want you to meet. She led them deeper into the palace, past chambers where advisors and dignitaries conducted business, down corridors restricted to royal family and essential staff. Thex's security teams tensed, bringing unknown aliens into the private quarters violated every protocol. But Sarathi's authority was absolute, and her guards obeyed. They reached a chamber filled with soft light and gentle music. Inside, recovering from injuries sustained at Meridian, 7 was Commander Thala, and beside her, playing with toys designed for young Orvani, was her daughter Nexa, one of the children the human medic had comforted during the rescue. Commander, Sarathi said softly, I brought guests. Thala looked up, mandibles spreading in recognition. Captain Chen? I didn't expect to see you again. Commander Thala. I'm glad you made it off Meridian 7 safely. Chen's expression softened, something almost vulnerable showing through the military discipline. And this must be Nexa. She approached Chen with the curiosity only young ones possessed, reaching up with small limbs. Chen knelt, bringing herself to the child's level, and allowed Nexa to examine her hands with gentle touches. Your medic was kind, Thala said quietly, during the rescue. Nexa was terrified, injured, screaming. Your medic, I never learned their name, spent 20 minutes calming her down when they should have been treating more serious casualties. They sang something in your language. Nexa still hums it sometimes. You are my sunshine, Chen said, recognition in her voice. Old Earth song. We teach it to all our medics for situations like that. Music translates better than words when someone's scared. Sarathi watched the exchange, seeing something she hadn't expected. The dangerous human captain, the warrior who destroyed a Vaskran fleet, was kneeling on the floor, letting a child examine her with patient gentleness. No threat, no dominance, just quiet compassion that required no translation. Your Majesty, Thala said, understanding why Sarathi had brought them here. Whatever you're deciding regarding Earth, I'll support. They saved my daughter's life. They saved thousands of lives. I trust them. Thank you, Commander. Sarathi gestured for the humans to follow, leaving Thala and Nexa to their recovery. They walked back through the corridors in silence until reaching a private conference chamber where Keseth waited with concern written across his features. The Council has demanded a response, the advisor said without preamble. They've learned of the human presence and are threatening sanctions if you proceed without their authorization. Let them threaten. Sarathi turned to Chen. I have a proposal. Orvan will sponsor Earth's application for Council membership. We'll vouch for your character, provide evidence of your interventions, and argue for integration rather than continued quarantine. But you must agree to certain conditions. Chen's expression became guarded. I'm listening. First, transparency. No more shadow operations. You coordinate with local authorities before interventions. Second, accountability. If you make mistakes, you own them. No hiding behind political immunity. Third, cultural exchange. You allow observers to learn about Earth, and you send people to learn about us. We bridge the gap that 40 years of isolation created.
And in return?
Official status, access to trade networks and scientific exchange. The ability to operate openly without constantly looking over your shoulder. Sarathi paused. And allies. Because the Vaskran aren't the only threat out here, and having friends who fight the way you do would make certain problems solvable.
Rodriguez nodded slightly.
Dr. Okonkwo showed cautious approval. We'll need to consult with our leadership. This is a bigger decision than I can make alone. Understood. How long do you need? 48 hours. We'll transmit your proposal to Earth, get authorization, and respond with a formal position. Acceptable. Sarathi extended all 4 arms in the Orvani gesture of serious agreement. Captain Chen, I'm taking a significant risk. If I'm wrong about you, if humanity proves untrustworthy, it will damage my kingdom's credibility for generations. I understand, but Your Majesty, you're not wrong. Chen met her eyes with absolute certainty. We're dangerous, yes. We're aggressive and unpredictable, and we don't fight fair. But we're also honest, and we don't abandon our friends. If you extend trust, we'll honor it. That's the one thing every human culture agrees on. You protect the people who stood beside you. Sarathi felt her decision solidify. Then we have an understanding. Keseth, prepare documents supporting Earth's Council application. Include Meridian 7, include testimony from every colony they've assisted, include tactical analyses that show their effectiveness, make it undeniable that humanity has been a positive force despite operating outside official channels. Your Majesty, this will cause significant political backlash. Proceed. The humans departed shortly after, returning to their ship with promises to respond within the deadline. Sarathi watched the vessel lift off, its engines burning with controlled precision, and wondered if she'd just made the best or worst decision of her reign. Keseth approached, data slate in hand. The evidence is compelling, but evidence can be interpreted many ways. The Council will ask why we should reward a species for breaking quarantine regardless of their intentions. We reward them because they saved our people when no one else did. Because civilization requires more than rules. It requires willingness to act when action is needed. The humans demonstrated that willingness. Now we demonstrate ours. And if they refuse your proposal, If Earth decides shadow operations serve them better, then we'll have learned something important about their character and we'll adjust accordingly. But I don't think they'll refuse. Did you see how Captain Chen interacted with Nexa? That wasn't political theater. That was genuine care for a frightened child. Species don't fake that kind of compassion. Species also don't develop reality-violating FTL and shield-penetrating weapons without significant motivation. We still don't understand their full capabilities. No, but we understand their intentions better now. That's progress. A past with excruciating slowness. Sarathi reviewed the intervention reports Chen had provided, contacted commanders at the colonies humans had assisted, and compiled testimony that painted a picture of Earth as chaotic but reliable. The Council sent increasingly aggressive demands for explanation, which she deflected with bureaucratic skill. Other monarchs contacted her privately, curious about the humans, worried about the implications, calculating how this affected their own positions. 24 hours before the deadline, Thex reported something interesting. Your Majesty, we've detected an increase in encrypted transmissions between Earth and several independent colonies. Not Council members, the frontier settlements that have minimal official protection. Making sure their network knows what's happening. More than that, they're offering those colonies direct communication channels. Emergency beacons that bypass Council relays and go straight to Earth. They're building infrastructure. Sarathi felt her spiracles constrict. They're not waiting for our answer. They're proceeding regardless. That way. Whether you endorse them or not, they're establishing themselves as an alternative authority. Protection without politics. Bold, arrogant, strategically brilliant. Do nothing, Sarathi decided. Let them build. If we're going to integrate them, we need to understand how they operate. This shows us. The deadline arrived. Captain Chen's face appeared on Sarathi's private communication channel. Expression neutral, but eyes showing carefully contained excitement. Your Majesty, I've consulted with Earth's Expeditionary Council. Your proposal was reviewed by our civilian leadership, military command, and scientific community. The consensus is acceptance. Sarathi felt relief flood through her. You agree to the conditions? Transparency, accountability, cultural exchange? Yes, we agree, with one addition. We want a formal mutual defense treaty. If Orvin faces existential threat, Earth responds. If Earth faces existential threat, Orvin responds. We don't want to be mercenaries you call when convenient. We want to be allies. That's a significant commitment. It's the only kind worth making. We don't do half measures, Your Majesty. Either we're part of this community, or we're not. If we're in, we're all in. Sarathi made the decision her instincts had been pushing toward since the moment she'd read Thiela's report. Agreed. I'll draft a formal treaty. We'll present it to the Council together. Unified front. Let them try to refuse both of us. Chen's smile was fierce. When should we expect the Council session? 1 week. I'll use that time to build support, convince other species that Earth's integration serves everyone's interests. You use that time to prepare your best diplomatic performance. The Council will test you. They'll look for any excuse to reject this. Understood. We won't give them one. Sarathi sat in silence, processing the weight of what she'd just committed to. Alliance with Earth. Formal recognition of humanity. A partnership with the species everyone feared. Keseth entered, somehow knowing his presence was needed. It's done then? It's begun. Whether it's done depends on the next week, and the next decade, and the next century. But yes, old friend. We're allies with Earth now. The galaxy will either accept it or try to stop it. And if they try to stop it, Sarathi thought about the Reckoning destroying a Vaskran fleet in minutes. About human tactics that treated war as survival rather than sport. About young soldiers who fought with brutal efficiency but showed gentle compassion to frightened children. Then they'll learn why humans answered calls for help when no one else did. They'll discover that monsters can be very useful to have on your side. She rose, moving to the window that overlooked her capital. Somewhere up there, beyond her atmosphere, human ships were listening to distress calls. Waiting. Ready? The galaxy was about to get much more interesting. The council chamber on Valorax Prime had been designed to intimidate. Circular, vast, with seating arranged in ascending tiers that placed the speaking floor far below the assembled representatives. Species from 47 different worlds sat in judgment, their various forms creating a mosaic of galactic diversity. At the highest tier, in positions of traditional authority, sat the founding species, the Kaleth with their crystalline thought forms, the Druina, whose gas-form bodies swirled in containment fields, and the Hevith, whose ancient wisdom had guided the council for 12 centuries. Queen Sarathy stood on the speaking floor, her ceremonial robes marking her as an established council member, a voice of authority and reason. Beside her, in simple Earth diplomatic uniforms, stood Captain Sarah Chen and her delegation. The humans looked impossibly small in this space, surrounded by species that towered over them or sprawled across multiple seats, but Chen stood with her back straight, eyes scanning the tiers with the same tactical assessment she'd used in every environment. She wasn't intimidated. She was analyzing. High Speaker Morith, a Kalaith whose thought forms glowed with barely contained skepticism, opened the session. Queen Sarathi of Orvan has petitioned this council to recognize the species known as humanity and rescind the quarantine established 4 decades ago. This is an unprecedented request, given humanity's history of aggressive behavior and continued violations of council space. Sarathi's spiracles flared. Violations that saved lives while council ships sat in dock. Violations that protected colonies we were too slow to defend. I stand before you not to apologize for Earth's actions, but to argue they should be formalized and recognized. Representative Chax of the Vaskran Confederacy, yes, the same species that had attacked Meridian, 7, rose to speak. The humans destroyed a Vaskran military fleet without warning, without attempting diplomatic resolution. They committed an act of war against a council member. Your fleet, Saratai responded coldly, was bombarding a civilian colony. You forfeited diplomatic consideration when you targeted non-combatants. The humans responded to a distress call we all received. They simply arrived first and acted decisively. They acted with violence that violated every rule of civilized warfare. Chen's voice cut across the chamber, speaking for the first time. You were killing unarmed civilians. There are no civilized rules that protect that. The chamber erupted. Half the representatives shouted objections to Chen's directness, while others murmured agreement. High Speaker Morris' thought forms flashed in agitation. Captain Chen, you will address this council with proper respect. I'll address this council with honesty, which is the greatest respect I can offer. Chen moved forward slightly, her voice carrying despite its lack of volume. You want to debate the morality of how we fight? Fine. Let's start with why we were fighting alone. Meridian. 7's distress call reached 17 different systems. The nearest Orvani fleet was 6 hours away. Other council members were closer but chose not to respond. We crossed 60 light years because no one else would. You crossed 60 light years because you were already violating quarantine, operating in council space without authorization, Chax countered. True. And in the 2 years we've been violating quarantine, we've saved 19 colonies, prevented 7 wars, and provided disaster relief 3 times, all without asking for payment or territory. All while your fleets debated jurisdiction and filled out authorization forms. Representative Celix, a Druna whose gaseous form shifted with careful thought, spoke with measured words. Captain Chen, your species' military effectiveness is precisely why the quarantine was established. You fight with frightening efficiency. You lack the restraint that prevents warfare from becoming genocide. Okonkwo stepped forward. High Speaker, if I may address Representative Celix's concern. Yes, humanity fights aggressively. We developed in a competitive environment that required violence for survival. But that same environment taught us the consequences of unrestricted warfare. We've seen genocide. We've committed it against ourselves. We know exactly where lack of restraint leads, and we've spent the last century building cultural safeguards against it. Cultural safeguards mean nothing against biological imperatives, a Hevith representative intoned, their ancient voice carrying weight of centuries. You are predators. That does not change because you wish it. No, Chen agreed, surprising everyone. We are predators. We evolved hunting other species, competing for resources, surviving in an environment that rewarded aggression. But predators can be selective about their prey. We hunt threats, not innocents. We protect the vulnerable, not exploit them. That's not contradiction, that's evolution. We learned what we are and chose how to apply it. Sarathi watched the council members process this. Chen was doing something unusual, admitting humanity's dangerous nature while reframing it as an asset rather than a liability. Risky approach, but honest. High Speaker Morith's thought form settled into a pattern of serious consideration. Yet your species nearly destroyed itself in global warfare. You achieved nuclear capability and immediately used it against your own population. That history suggests violence is your default response. It was. Lieutenant Rodriguez said, speaking for the first time. We killed each other over territory, resources, ideology, skin color, religious interpretation. We developed weapons capable of destroying our entire biosphere and came within minutes of using them. We absolutely were violent, aggressive, and self-destructive. He paused, meeting the High Speaker's crystalline gaze. But we didn't destroy ourselves. We stopped. We chose to. Not because we became peaceful. We didn't. We're still aggressive, still competitive, still capable of terrible violence, but we learned to direct those impulses toward productive ends. We fight natural disasters. We hunt diseases. We pursue scientific challenges with the same intensity we used to pursue wars. We changed what we aimed at, not what we were. And you believe this makes you suitable for council membership? Asked a representative from the Minar Collective, a species known for philosophical approaches to conflict. We believe it makes us useful, Chen said. Your civilization evolved past violence through cultural development and biological temperament. You achieved peace because aggression became evolutionarily disadvantageous. That's admirable, but it leaves gaps. When someone threatens your colonies, you debate responses while civilians die. When crises require immediate, decisive action, your careful consensus building becomes liability. We don't replace that approach. We complement it. You provide wisdom and restraint. We provide rapid response and willingness to get bloody when necessary. Chaks of the Vaskrin rose again. You describe yourselves as attack dogs, barely controlled weapons. Why should we trust you won't turn on the very people you claim to protect? Because Sarathi interjected, they've had 2 years to do exactly that and haven't. They've had opportunities to demand payment, seize territory, establish puppet governments and colonies they saved. Instead, they've asked for nothing. The evidence speaks for itself. The evidence shows patience, not benevolence. They could be building influence for future exploitation. Dr. Okonkwo pulled out her data device, projecting holographic displays across the chamber. These are contracts we've offered to every colony we've assisted. Each one grants them the right to refuse our help, request our departure, or file formal complaints against our conduct. 73% of colonies have asked us to remain on call. 21% requested permanent liaison officers. The remaining 6% asked us to leave, and we did. No pressure. No retaliation. If we're building an empire, we're doing it remarkably poorly. The chamber settled into thoughtful silence. Representative Celix's gaseous form shifted through several colors before speaking. You present compelling evidence of restrained behavior, but what happens when restraint becomes inconvenient? When someone offers resistance to your help? When a colony decides they prefer council protection over Earth's immediate response? Then they get council protection and we leave. We're not offering an ultimatum. We're offering partnership. Some colonies will trust you more than us. That's fine. Some will want us on standby. That's fine too. The goal isn't to replace council authority. It's to fill gaps in coverage and response time. You speak of partnership, High Speaker Morith said slowly, yet you've been operating without our knowledge or consent for 2 years. That is not how partners behave. You're right, Chen admitted. We should have approached you sooner. But honestly, we didn't think you'd listen. The quarantine was based on fear of what we might become, not evidence of what we were. We spent 40 years isolated, trying to prove ourselves through peaceful development. Nobody cared. Nobody checked if we'd changed. So we started answering distress calls, figuring concrete action would speak louder than diplomatic appeals. You manipulated situations to force recognition. We responded to emergencies you were ignoring. If that forced recognition, it's because the need was always there and nobody wanted to acknowledge it. A new voice entered the debate. Representative Thesia of the Kuvari Dominion, a species known for brutal honesty and direct pragmatism. This debate is pointless theater. The real question is simple. Are humans more dangerous inside the council or outside it? If we maintain quarantine, they continue operating in shadows, building influence we can't monitor, making alliances we can't control. If we integrate them, we at least have oversight, treaties, and accountability. The choice is between managed risk and unknown risk. Several representatives shifted uncomfortably. Thesia had a talent for cutting through moral arguments to reach uncomfortable practical truths. You suggest we accept them out of fear rather than trust? Asked the minor representative. I suggest we accept them because the alternative is worse. They've demonstrated capability, restraint, and commitment to protecting civilians. Those traits make them either invaluable allies or terrifying enemies. Simple risk assessment suggests choosing the first option. Representative Thesia speaks truth. Earth is here, whether we acknowledge it or not. They're answering calls, saving lives, building relationships. We can shape that process through official integration, or we can pretend it isn't happening until the situation becomes unmanageable. I've chosen to shape it. I urge you to do the same. High Speaker Morath's thought forms cycled through complex patterns: deliberation, doubt, calculation. Finally, they settled into a structure that indicated decision. This council will recess for deliberation. We will vote on Earth's petition in 4 hours. Until then, Captain Chen and Queen Sarathi will remain available for questions from individual representatives. The session broke. Immediately, smaller groups formed, species clustering together to discuss positions, representatives approaching Sarathi and Chen with private concerns, political alliances shifting in real time. Chen handled it with surprising diplomatic skill, answering questions directly, refusing to make promises she couldn't keep, letting her actions speak through the evidence Dr. Okonkwo continually provided. During a brief private moment, Sarathi pulled Chen aside. "You're doing well. Better than I expected. Most humans I've studied would have lost patience with this process." Chen smiled tiredly. "Most humans you've studied were 40 years ago, fresh from global conflicts, scared and defensive. We've had time to learn. Plus, I spent 6 months studying galactic diplomatic protocols before this mission. I knew what to expect. You knew you'd be compared unfavorably to more peaceful species. I knew we'd be judged for what we are, not what we wish we were. So we owned it. Yes, we're aggressive. Yes, we're dangerous. But we're also loyal, protective, and we honor our commitments. Those traits balance out if you're willing to see past the fear." 4 hours later, the council reconvened. High Speaker Morath's thought forms were unreadable as they addressed the chamber. The council has deliberated. We have reviewed evidence, consulted precedent, and calculated implications. The vote on rescinding Earth's quarantine and granting council membership is as follows: 29 in favor, 15 opposed, 3 abstentions. Chen's expression didn't change, but Sarathi saw her hands clench briefly, relief and triumph carefully controlled. However, Morath continued, and the chamber tensed. This membership comes with specific conditions. Earth will undergo a probationary period of 5 years. During this time, all military operations must be coordinated with council oversight. Cultural exchange programs will be mandatory, and Earth will submit to regular reviews of their adherence to council law. Violation of these terms will result in immediate expulsion and reinstatement of quarantine. Do you accept these conditions, Captain Chen? With one clarification, coordination with council oversight doesn't mean waiting for permission. If lives are in immediate danger, we respond immediately and report afterward. Oversight, not pre-authorization. Morath's thought forms flickered with something that might have been approval. Acceptable. Emergency response protocols will be drafted to clarify response parameters. Welcome to the council, Captain Chen. Try not to make us regret this decision. We'll try not to give you reason to, High Speaker. The session ended. Sarathi and Chen walked from the chamber together, followed by their respective delegations. Outside, the Valorak sunset painted the sky in colors that neither species found particularly beautiful, but both could appreciate. 5 years probation, Chen said. They don't fully trust us. They don't fully trust anyone, but they've given you a chance. That's more than they've given any species in 40 years. Use it wisely.
We will, and Your Majesty?
Thank you. You took a risk supporting us. We won't forget that. I know you won't. That's why I did it. Sarathi paused, watching Earth's delegation prepare to depart. Captain Chen, one personal question. That child at Meridian 7, Nexa. Your medic spent time with her when they should have been treating critical casualties. Why? Chen's expression softened. Because she was scared and alone, and we had 3 minutes before the next wave of wounded arrived. Sometimes the most critical casualty isn't the most physically injured. Sometimes it's the one who needs to know someone cares. She met Sarathi's eyes. We're monsters, Your Majesty. Aggressive, dangerous, chaotic. But we're monsters who remember what it's like to be scared. And we protect the scared ones, even when it's inefficient. Especially when it's inefficient. That's what makes us human. Sarathi watched the Earth delegation depart, their ship rising into the alien sky with controlled precision. She thought about Nexa humming an Earth song in a hospital bed. About Captain Webb telling Meridian. 7, they weren't alone. About Chen admitting humanity's dangerous nature while demonstrating their compassionate one. The galaxy had just accepted monsters into its midst. But perhaps Sarathi thought that was exactly what the galaxy needed. Rules and civilization were beautiful, necessary, fundamental to peaceful coexistence. But when rules failed and civilization trembled, when someone needed help and nobody came, it was good to know that somewhere out there, monsters were listening, and when called, they'd answer. Every time. The stars shone overhead, and among them, Earth was no longer alone. The quarantine had ended, the integration had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. Because the monsters had come home. Not to conquer, but to protect. And that made all the difference.